One.
¿Qué pasa, campeones? Old school intro. Welcome to Churros y Tácticas Podcast. It is Tuesday, the 1st of November. Kiyan is giving me a little shimmy shake with the hand. He was expecting more R's, but not yet, not yet. It was a big weekend, make no mistake. Barça made ground with the league leader still by picking up a very valuable 3 points over in Mestalla. And with that, the dreaded month of October has come to an end. My God, breathe a sigh of relief, all culés. October's done. Bayern's done. The Clásico's done. Villarreal, Athletic Club. The bounce back has been positive. So we've got positives to take away, of course, especially since Real Madrid also dropped valuable points in the Bernabeu against Catalan side. Girona, our little brother, doing us a little favor. Here to discuss it all for Kiyan, at least. It's like your third pod at this point about Real Madrid and the controversy and the referee or not. I don't know. You know, the dipping form, let's say, that Madrid has been experiencing.
Yeah, typically
say that?
Churros is almost a third pod for me after the game because I do post-game show and then I do a segment that we shamelessly stole the name of. We call it El Día Después. We do that, and then Churros comes in line third. Last but not least, if I had the choice, it would have been nice to do Churros right away. Like, you know, but maybe it's better. You know, I think it's probably dangerous if we do like a classical podcast post game right after the game when it's at its spiciest peak. So, yeah. A little bit exhausted.
It's been an emotional season so far, and it's getting touchy for Madridistas as well now, which is it's nice to see that.
It's always kind of, I mean, this time of year, from my experience, is always a lot of overreaction either way. There's the flurry to start the season. And there's a lot of, you know, just things you have to kind of sift through. What is real? What is not real? Especially like the first couple weeks of the season. You don't really know like what's real, what's not real, what's sustainable, what's not sustainable. The sample size is tiny. By now you get some idea of maybe where the team is headed. But it's still a long way to me, like in terms of where the teams will be in the springtime. One thing I'm pretty sure of, though, at this point is that I think Real and Barca will be in the springtime pretty neck and neck still. You know, I would expect both teams will drop points. Both teams will win most of their games. And the Clásico de Camp Nou will be decisive again. I think that's pretty safe to say. I mean, bar a catastrophe. The one thing that I'm holding on to dear life on, just terrified of the World Cup, what that means for everybody. And not just for Real Madrid, but I think every big team has this collective anxiety. Like there's like, you know, some excitement over the World Cup, obviously, but not knowing, you know, what's going to happen when everyone comes back. There's already so many good players missing out in the World Cup due to injury. Just God willing, everyone comes back in one piece is my hope. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's pretty much sums up los pensamientos, the thoughts and feelings of football fans everywhere that still want to see their nation do well and progress. But at the same time, come back healthy, boys. Yeah, exactly. Especially, I mean, we've obviously had a string of bad luck in this last international break with 4 or 5 key players being out. And like I said, it hit in the worst possible time in the month of October that has knocked Barça around or out around. In the case of the Champions League. But luckily, you know, the bounce back has been positive. Like I said, I do feel like we have a lot of positives to still take away and to sort of continue to believe and back Xavi's team, back the style of play, back the philosophy and ideology that has brought us all our success and the greatest times that we've ever known. And it takes patience and it takes time. And I think Xavi's on the right path. I don't, sign on to the excessive criticism that has been going around and even naming of Tuchel and stuff like that, or replacement coaches. I think that's absurd. and definitely a wrong way to go, especially at this point. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's a lot of work to be done. This team is far from playing at the level that we want or that Xavi wants. And that is first and foremost, of course, the concern and the main talking point and adjustment that has to be made within the team. But other than that, I think this can still be a successful season, and I think we will see this team continue to play a better football and execute, it at a higher level. And in the big hurdle is, of course, the big teams and the big games, if you will. And that's not taking anything away from a Villarreal and Athletic Club and a Valencia, because again, those are big games and they are big teams, and they can, they could have kicked us around. La Liga could have been over for Barca had this month of October gone really, really wrong. Make no mistake, playing Bayern, playing Inter twice, playing in a Clásico, all that, back to back to back, with the injuries and everything in and around it, that it didn't go as planned. We're out of the Champions League. We exited. Massive emotional damage, right? Massive emotional damage. Then the Clásico disappointment. I mean, I commend this team for how we finished the month of October. And then now, we're still, inshallah, we'll see. Like you said, the World Cup, hopefully it'll go all in terms of health, good for our players.
Well, the great thing is you guys can absolutely beat the crap out of Victoria Pilsen tonight and then pat yourself on the back and say, we're back, baby. It works.
There you go. Well, I'll tell you what, this match tonight, it will, I am looking forward to it. Yeah, for sure. Our last game in the Champions League, we have to, there'll be a lot of young players. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those are the games that
we'll see some Champions League debuts, I think.
Yeah, I mean, those are the games also, if Real Madrid was in that situation, what I'd be interested in seeing is some of the young players play, a Champions League game, some of the Castilla players being promoted. That's kind of cool. Where do you want to start, man? I mean, I guess we already started somewhere, but I was thinking about this.
Yes, we did.
The last two Clásicos, we never got a chance to record together. For both Clásicos, we did the thing where we put two monologues together.
Solo.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
And no, that's not true.
Pretty much.
It was a Champions League exit this time, not a Clásico that we didn't record together.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why it felt like a Clásico. One. Yeah, I don't know why it felt like a Clásico last week after Bayern knocked you guys out. But yeah, we didn't record together on that one. So unfortunately for you, you didn't get a chance to rip into me after the 4-0. And unfortunately for me, I never got a chance to face you face-to-face for that one after you were eliminated from the Champions League. But I will say this. I did not roll a single R in my solo monologue. Take note of that. Not a single R was rolled. I just said...
I think I saw a comment about that.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that, yeah. Well, why didn't you? Out of respect.
I think it was just
the
way I worded it was that, it's like a worrying sign for La Liga, because it wasn't even just Barca's elimination, it was Atletico's elimination.
No.
The way they were eliminated, Sevilla are out. And I said it in the podcast.
And it was right after I said, Spanish teams progress deep in the European competitions always, and we just been crashing. And that was like a jinx.
It's been a rough year. We better get one team.
It's been rough.
We have the math in our favor now. One team from Spain has to win Europa League at least. It'd be embarrassing if we didn't get one team. We should get an all-Spanish final. We have 200 teams in that tournament now. We gotta make a dent in that tournament at least, including Sevilla, who are the kings of the competition. So we got to get something going there.
I tell you what, the Europa League, it's got some big teams. I'm not just defending it because we're playing it second consecutive time. Hey, it's got Juventus, United, Arsenal, Barca, Sevilla. Hey, look, it's got good teams in there.
Might even get a Frankfurt rematch, depending on what happens today in Group D. Group D is insane,
that would be interesting.
By the way.
I'll go for an Eintracht revenge. Come on.
Did you see
I like that.
Sporting Lisbon?
I'm feeling better about it.
Sporting Lisbon today in their game against Frankfurt in Lisbon have like 16,000 empty seats because they were available and they refused to let Eintracht Frankfurt fans buy the tickets, so they rather just keep the seats empty. And I'm like, where are the Sporting fans?
Set a
this
standard.
is a big game. Season on the line. What's going on? Who's this? Like,
well, what is going
this
on
in Portugal? What's going on?
So what is it? Is it because it's Puente over there? You know, this is the 1st of November is national holiday here in Spain. Is Dia de los Santos, right? De todos los Santos.
Does that apply in Portugal?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. It probably applies in Portugal. In that case, people leave the city. Like here now, it's people leave on Friday and they don't come back until tonight because then they'll go back to work tomorrow.
No excuses. That's brutal.
The fact. No, it's no excuse. It's no excuse. And trust me, I think Barca, we've set the standard because it was the same thing. It was like Easter around those fechas, those dates, and people were doing what is known as Puente, like the extended weekend, a long weekend.
Yeah.
And just like sold off their tickets to these fans, and we were just invaded.
Yeah,
oh
you're jogging my memory now. I just remembered like that's part of the reason why that happened in the Camp Nou as well. And and obviously you guys have rectified that a little bit by, you know, asking, like, for example, the Inter fans, like, people not to wear blue and black when Inter was playing at the Camp Nou.
You know, this will you'll enjoy this. You know, what is the sort of a topic amongst us at the office a little bit. It's like, what loss or what exit, you know, what time as a culé was the most painful, was the most hurtful? Like, you go back and you're like, your memory bank, you're like, man, you know, fucking Gaspar, Figo, that was fucked up. Those were some bad days and all that and this, that. And then you go, you know, the last 7 years. And I was thinking Eintracht. I think, you know, between Roma, Liverpool, obviously Bayern, like, we've had bad nights, traumatic, hurtful nights. But Eintracht, for me, maybe because I was working as well, I was presenting, and I kind of went, I dropped a little bit my say professional hat, and I was calling it, you know, one of the darkest nights in Barca's history. Seeing the Camp Nou de blanco, white of all colors, and just you know, the spanking that we received that night, and the breakdown of the team. Totally, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, why don't we talk about more relevant things? I mean,
like referees. Let's talk something that we have in common now. All of a sudden, it looks like we can talk about referees.
No, we can't. Absolutely not. I hate talking about referees.
No, but you do though. So we're allowed to recognize or mention mistakes. But then at some point that becomes complaining if the mentioning comes from the blue and red side. But when it's the mentioning from the white side, it's not complaining. It's just, we can mention it.
Listen, I mean, I think,
come on,
within each fan base there are going to be different feelings among fans, right? I think it's fine to talk about referee decisions in a vacuum, and also talk about the more bigger contextual problem of referees making mistakes. Where I think I differentiate from some of those fans, gotta be careful, some of those fans, is that I just don't believe in conspiracies. That's it. I also, when you zoom out and look at last Sunday night's game, me personally, and I know that many Madridistas share these views, not a fan of the way Real Madrid posted on their website, the way they did. Not a fan of Ancelotti coming out and talking about it.
This is like, can you at least agree with me? Because I got a lot of grief from you on this podcast when you were like, you know, it's like Madrid, we just don't do it like that. We don't complain. Laporta's so crazy. This, and I said, I have seen comunicados. I've seen Florentino. I've seen Butragueño. Madrid do complain, and this is the proof now after one, say, controversial call, which in all fairness and I want to discuss that as well, because for me it's a handball and it's not a goal. Surprise, surprise. But I want to discuss that why. But the first moment where Madrid has ground on, let's say, involving the referee in a discussion, in an outcome, there's this massive outcry. And obviously, yes, culés are going to be like, well, there's clear hypocrisy here. There's clear double standards, because when we mention it, we get called llorones and all the other insults that come with it. So, if you have to stay consistent, or you don't discuss it, or, you mention it and you see the problem. And I hear your conspiracy, what do you want to call it? Like your conspiracy denial or not wanting to go down that route. I respect that. But then at least, don't, I guess, cut the conversation short when I was mentioning these kind of, factors that had a clear influence in the game, like we did against Bayern, like we did against Inter. So here's where the handball comes into play. In the Inter match, Kiyan, as you'll probably remember, Barca scored the 1-1 through Pedri, but in that play, the goal's disallowed because in that play, Ansu Fati touches the ball, and the ball ends up with Pedri's feet, and he scores a goal, disallowed. In that same game, Dumfries directly touches the ball with his hand, right? No penalty is called. So, like that, those two plays in and of itself have a direct, influence and outcome on the game. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think there's a butterfly effect in everything, but ultimately.
So I okay, go.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you want me to say. Like I'm happy to answer a question, but I don't to me personally, my conscience is clear because I don't have double standards on this. I think there's hypocrisy on both sides. I think there are too many Madridistas who also call out culés for this stuff without looking at themselves in the mirror, realizing that they're guilty of it too with their own club. And I don't like the fact that Alemany came out and complained about the referee. I don't like that Xavi complained. I don't like the fact that Laporta came to the referee's locker after the classroom. But about Diego, but I also don't like it when Real Madrid do that either. And
right.
Like with and I won't go on like large tangents about referee conspiracies. What I like with the Asensio thing, I'll mention it, analyze the play, and treat it as an incident in a game, just like I would if I was analyzing a Mallorca game where Mallorca gets screwed or not screwed, Getafe, Elche, whatever, whoever, Barca, Real Madrid. But that, to me, is just not the focal point of the discussion, where so many people turn it into the focal point of the discussion. And where I fundamentally disagree with those people is that refs suck. I agree that refs suck. That's where I agree. Where I disagree is that there's a man with a cigar in the Illuminati room, with the feet on his chair, saying "fuck this team, let's screw them every week," and not anyone else. That's where I fundamentally disagree.
Okay, I get that. My point. Two things I want to mention. The only going back to what you were saying before is, I guess what I'm saying here to you, like when I bring up these reasons in the past, to then be dismissed or just basically summarized, then you're just complaining about refereeing mistakes. And then sort of at some point we come into this conspiracy discussion. One, because I like conspiracies, okay? And I like to go a little bit down that route. It makes this pod feel a little bit different as well from the other ones you have. And it's entertaining in its own when you take it don't take it at face value necessarily. Other things are truth, like that interview that I sent you with David Jimenez, which I hope you listened to. Stan, thank you for reaching out to me and thanking me for recommending you seeing that interview. So Stan Sports, you met him in the Bernabeu actually. You mentioned you took some pictures, right? Yeah. So and then the other thing, then just not be summarized as like, well, you complainers, llorones, because I think we have reason, and you got Madridistas can agree, to bring these kind of mistakes into the discussion, right? Now, you said you don't like it when Aleman and Xavi come out and complain. I heard what you said on the previous pod, right? On the pod you just did before with the Spanish guy.
Jose.
I think you just did it yet. I think he had not a lot of hair.
Me? I'm Iranian Canadian. No, Lucas was the other one. Yeah.
Lucas. Okay.
Yeah.
You talked about how referees should be accountable for their actions.
Mm-hmm.
You said, why don't they come out and explain the reasons for making certain decisions? Mm-hmm. Xavi said exactly, you are literally quoting Xavi after, I think it was the Inter game. He literally said that. He said, I want referees to come out and explain certain decisions. It was, in fact, I'm 100% certain. That was after the Inter, when you had the double standards of one handball being called and the other one not even being reviewed, right? So he said the same thing as you.
I'd have to look at the Xavi quotes again, but I'm pulling it up now. He said it was injustice. Okay, so like he's not. This is what he said. He said, "I'm angry. The referees should come out and explain their decisions because we don't understand anything. What we live today is injustice, etc." So it was not quite what you said, and also Xavi throughout his entire playing career, and
it was.
That's fine, but that's a different wording and tone than what you're portraying it as. Whether you could by that same token, Diego, you could also say what Ancelotti said about Asensio's handball was probably factually correct, but that the issue was that shouldn't have been the focus of the discussion and shouldn't have been something that comes out of the club statement is the way I see it.
You're saying that the referee invented the penalty?
I think by the rules, I think 80% of referees wouldn't have called that a penalty. Because in the rules,
and we saw it in the Barca Inter match.
By the rules, if the ball bounces off your own body and hits your hand, that's not a handball. It's not a penalty.
So Barca got robbed then as well because our goal was disallowed for that rule.
Listen, Diego.
In fact, it even bounced off of the team.
I said that was a bad call in the Inter Barca game. But this is what drives me nuts about some of the stuff you say in the podcast. Everything is like, what about us? What about this? What about this? Rather than just talking about what happens in isolation. It's like everything is like, well, Real Madrid did this 20 years ago or 10 years ago, or, this happened in our game too. It's like, again, where you and I think still differ on this is that you really think that there's a conspiracy, and I don't. Something that Lucas and I said, that if you go on social media and you see a Barca fan arguing with a Chelsea fan, or a Barca fan arguing with an Inter fan, or a Barca fan arguing with an Arsenal fan, or a Barca fan arguing with a Real Madrid fan, or whatever combinations you want to bring, Real Madrid and Bayern Munich, every single fan will come to that argument with the same social media clip reel with all the decisions that went against them in the same game that they were also favored a bunch of times. Which is like literally the definition of this is proof that there is no conspiracy. There are just bad decisions that happen all the time. And I'm not going to sit and moan about it. Because me personally, I love tactical analysis and discussion about what happened in the game. I think people come to, maybe, I don't know about this one necessarily, but people come to the Managing Madrid podcast to get tactical analysis and analysis of the game. They don't come and hear us sit there and complain about everything that happens for an hour and come up with conspiracies. So that's one side of it, but
that is not you don't frame this as if that is the entire time that I spent talking about just that.
It's a large chunk of time.
Because
it's a large chunk of time.
Oh no!
After Clásico, man, we spent way too much time talking about the referees and not the actual game. Also, I'm willing to bet 100%. If I had a gun to my head and we put you to a lie detector test, and that Asensio handball was Ansu Fati in the box, and that was called on him, you would say that it wasn't a penalty. I'm willing to bet this. We put you to a lie detector test, and that was Ansu Fati instead of Asensio. You would have come up with the right wording in the rules to say that should not have been a penalty. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, Kiyan, again, I mean, no, but what did I complain about after the Inter game? I complained about the double standard, meaning that I was willing to accept that the goal was, say, disallowed in the end because the rule states that Ansu Fati Ansu Fati touched it with his hand before it got to Pedri's feet. Therefore, at that point in time, that's where the penalty or the play should have been stopped, etc., etc. The thing is, in that game, that didn't happen in a much clearer handball case when Dumfries just fucking touched it. Like, hand was out of position, not attached to his body. He fucking, hand to God's it. And the referee doesn't even fucking acknowledge it. That is...
It's a bad call.
Fucking wrong. It's wrong.
It's a bad call.
It's a very bad call. Yes. Yes.
But as I said...
Look, we're going to see more of these calls. We're going to see more of these calls because it's happened. I can't think of it now, but the bouncing off this is going to come up again. It's going to come up again, and we'll discuss it again. I understand where you want to draw the line from conspiracy, no conspiracy. Your view is everybody gets fucked. Let's talk more about the tactical analysis. Let's focus more on how these teams need to improve. I think Madridistas the majority will agree that you want better from your team. And I've been saying that all along about Barca. If you want to have a discussion about each team's ceiling, I'm happy to discuss and debate that I think Barca's ceiling is higher.
Based on what?
And if I have spent more time, well, we'll talk about that. But if I've spent more time complaining about refereeing decisions and adding conspiracies, which I don't like the framing of conspiracy because I didn't put any conspiracy forward other than the David Jimenez interview, right? Okay, I might have insinuated sort of a witch hunt where UEFA wants to make a poster boy out of Barca. How I could see that sort of narrative, be fuck, man. I mean, the thing is, after what I saw as well from a Netflix documentary, which I would love to actually invite the person who wrote a book about it as well, the refereeing betting scandal of the NBA. Like I said,
Diego, you guys had 5 tests in October. You failed. Not October, sorry. You had 5 tests this season. You failed all of them. You didn't win a single one. You conceded 12 goals in those 5 games. We don't. That's not again. The primary issue. The primary concern is not the referee.
Okay, I'm not saying that. I am not saying that.
You want the referees to be better. I agree with that. We're on the same page about this. We're 100% on the same page about this.
I was going to say something else. I was going on a different. Now
I saved you. I saved you from
Listen.
the tangent. I saved you. I pulled you back. I pulled you back in.
It's not that is the number one factor. I just like at some point, again, watching these kind of referee scandal documentaries, it makes you kind of start connecting dots at some point. At least me, I like to be curious and I like to, be critical and look into these kind of things, or at least, think about it. Not as a primary factor. And again, I hold Barca at a much higher standard. And I think that the ceiling is also much higher of this team. Definitely higher than you put it anyway, because basically the way you summarize Barca is Lewandowski and y punto and nothing else. So
come on, man. No, I did not say that. Go listen to that again. I said this team
what did you say?
This team is absolutely a La Liga title contender. There's no question about that. What I said was essentially, and I uploaded a 10-minute monologue on YouTube for free from that 1-hour podcast that we uploaded on Patreon. What's holding Barca back in these big games is their style of football and their lack of tactical flexibility. That's what I said. Lewandowski for sure is a game changer for you guys, but he's not enough to prevent these, defensive transition and the high line and all these things and prevent Bayern from doing what they did to you. That's all I said. Well, and God knows where this team would be without Lewandowski, by the way, because no tactics are going to save the day without Lewandowski this season. And that's not even a knock, by the way, because like if you take the star player out of any team, it's going to suffer. You know, you take Benzema out of Real Madrid, it's not the same team. Although we've treaded water this season, you know, I guess there are arguments against that too. If you take out Man City's star player, they're probably still a great team, you know, with great systems. But the point stands. Like that's all I said. Obviously, Lewandowski is a game changer. But you got to admit, like, where would this team be without Lewandowski?
I don't know. I don't want to think about it. It's like saying, where would the Bulls be without Jordan? Where would where would Barca be without Messi, etc.? But it's and knock on wood, he obviously doesn't pick up an injury anytime soon. You said we failed 5 tests. I disagree. I think that we failed the Champions League, and we are still in La Liga. We're alive. Those 2 tests, one we failed, and I'm happy to use the word dramatically, you know, with disappointment. Fracaso, as they say in Spanish. But the Clásico knock was massive. But again, we stood up, we bounced back, and we're still in the race. And that at the end is more important in the long term than you know, these short-term exams or you know, tests.
That's true. That's a fair point. And I trust, if I was a neutral looking at this, but even as a Madridista, I'll say it, I actually trust Barca more to be more consistent in the league from now on. Like I could definitely see Real Madrid dropping more points like they did on Sunday more this season. Totally could see it. But I could also see Barcelona just put the foot down and win all those games that they need to win. Whereby and for Real Madrid, it might come down to what happens in the Clásico and the Camp Nou to make up the difference. Because, as I said, I'm really genuinely, and I mean this, I'm more worried about the games against Girona, against Getafe, than I am for the Clásico. Just this is the way this team is built. It's always been built like this since I've been watching football. There are like exceptions to the rule, but even in like most seasons, even when we win the title, these games like are just riddled throughout our season. We can't get out of our system. It's a problem. I trust Barca way more than Real Madrid to actually be consistent from here on in. Yeah, and I made that point too. I don't know. There's no question. This is not a debate that Barcelona in La Liga, they're absolutely one of the favorites. Like they're just too good compared to the rest of the league.
So what's your stylistic pick? Well, then the one that you mentioned with Xavi or with Barca, and all culés that listen to this pod, Kiyan tried to give some quote-unquote friendly advice on how our club should progress and become more successful. His main reason was...
It was friendly advice.
Because it wasn't, man.
Yeah, it was.
Any culé that listens to that should be like, this is garbage.
Go look at the culé comments on that one.
Worst advice.
Culés love that. Culés love that.
Don't single out two anonymous like the culés in the comments section, because the general are taking them as like the voice of knowledge or generalizing culés. As a whole,
they all said thank you, dear Kiyan.
I am embarrassed.
God bless you. They bowed. They said thank you, Lord.
If those two are watching, please contact me and I will put you in touch with what a true culé is. And,
all I really said was an extension of what most culés are feeling. What are the issues with the team? The team's defense in games that are against teams that are really, really good defensively and on the counterattack. It does not. Their game plan does not suit them in those games. That's all I said, basically, for 25 minutes. And I don't see where the lie is in that.
Well, the lie is that there's no lie. I think, and I hope you discussed Araujo, probably the most fundamental part of that defensive system.
If the team is reliant on one great defender to save you, that's a problem.
Listen. listen.
That's why you signed all these defenders, man, to have
the right back.
So many teams have injuries to great players.
Can you listen 1 second?
I'm listening.
Xavi has a clear go-to. If all was healthy and he would have, let's say, his entire wish list met, he would have Koundé and Araujo as the two starting central defenders, right? I think in Balde, he has found his left. Now the right back position is still sort of a roulette. It's probably the weakest link, if you will. It's seen so many players play out of position. There's a lot of experimenting. We've seen Araujo, Koundé, Balde, Sergi Roberto, Bellerin now coming out of an injury as well. It's a constant. There's constant rotation there. I'm not saying that Araujo is the one and only, like, having a world-class central defender definitely helps out the entire defensive line, and he's a leader in that regard. And he would make sure that certain players would, the offside trap, errors like that we've seen Gerard Piqué make, but I don't want to single out anyone. You would expect those not to be made in those big games that you talk about by somebody like Araujo or Koundé, etc. So, look, I think that Xavi's defense has been weakened during those big games. The Bayern games, the Inter games, and the Clásico was coming out of the international break. It was when Barca was at its frailest, its most frail. And now it's up to Xavi to pass one of those what you deem big tests, which are big tests against on the out of a let's say La Liga routine that is a high stress game, a knockout round, on the European in European competition, in our case the Europa League. That has, like, Xavi has that test to pass. I agree. But to talk about, defensive frailties, when you see just how consistent this team has been in La Liga, 9 clean sheets, 9 out of 11, 1 goal conceded for the longest time of the Clásico, of course, but also now, not conceding. And so I think, saying that our defense is as bad as is being made out to be. It's the times that we do concede, it's been dramatic, but also the circumstances, Kiyan, and I'll stop there. The circumstances have been odd. Like, the 3 goals conceded at home against Inter, that was an insane game. And you can talk tactics in terms of maybe, or not maybe, but this team played with a lot of anxiety, as Xavi put it. We were going all out, like it was all out, and we went all in that regard. And defense became an afterthought, and we paid the price for it. Right? There were a lot of, but it was like that classic kind of Champions League game that really caught us on that occasion. Against Bayern, you can say, okay, another 3 against Bayern. Yes, but that the team was depressed. Now I'm coming up with excuses. You're probably going to say, fine. So stop me there. I'll stop from rambling. I think that this team, I want to believe, and from what I see, is we're on an ascending line, we're going upwards. And, I expect this team to improve the way Xavi is coaching it and the way it's developing.
I have a newsflash for you, man. Araujo played in last season, lost to Frankfurt when all these problems were there defensively.
Last season, this team wasn't...
He played in the Clásico 3-2 loss last season. He played in the 3-0 against Bayern.
We're talking this season, Kiyan. I'm just
saying,
season.
Like, if you think Araujo is the guy who's going to save bad tactics, it's not true. Like, sure, is he going to have some heroics here and there? That's fine. I'm not saying his loss is ideal. But this team has been
pretty good defensively as well.
In La Liga,
this team has been very solid.
This is the point I'm making. I think the success in La Liga is really clouding your judgment, because it's not the case. These teams in La Liga are one thing. You're tackling a different beast in big games. That's my point. It's almost the more you do well in La Liga, the worse it is for you, because it's putting band-aids on these massive holes. That's the way I see it. Like, Araujo's a really good player. Let's say, God forbid, Araujo, plays in the World Cup, because there's a chance of that now, apparently.
You're kidding me. No, I don't think there is.
Yeah, I've seen it that like he's ahead of schedule or something with his recovery. I don't know. But let's say, okay, maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe, but whatever, for God forbid, something happens to him in the next couple months. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, well, Araujo's gone. Can't fix our tactics anyway, and we don't have Araujo to save us. So what are we going to do? Araujo and Koundé are not going to stop those, like, the weird thing about the Bayern game, and like, yeah, you can, I admit that in some sense, like, Barcelona went into that game mentally defeated before because they were already knocked out.
And Bayern had something to win, and I texted you this, Kiyan. Bayern were playing for first place. There's this like thought that Bayern had nothing like at stake. No, they still could have dropped first place to Inter, so they wanted to get first place. This game was just pride for this team, and after a massive blow, obviously that was the elimination of the Champions League. So if anything, Barca had nothing to play for.
And that's very well true, and that's what I'm saying. But you can also argue like this: what Bayern looked like at the Camp Nou last week or whenever it was very similar to Bayern Barca last year, where it's like they just go on the field and it looks like a training exercise for them. It looks like they're not even breaking a sweat.
We were dominated badly. It was sheer domination again. Yes.
And I would argue if there was okay, they're pretty much guaranteed first place, but like they're not playing with like real pressure. But I think if they were, they actually probably could have even done more damage. But that's besides the point. But again, the point stands. The proof is in the pudding. And I said this, like, 1 goal conceded in 10 games in La Liga, I think it was. Not just, I'm not including the Clásico. And then,
but winning La Liga would be a massive achievement. I mean, I will take that.
I won't deny it. But it's not even just about Xavi anymore. It's like this goes back years, even when Messi was there. Same problems every year. Same problems in big games. Well, and that's the point I made.
But you're thereby you're saying you need to throw your entire philosophy of 120 years out the window.
Well, 120 years. 120 years. Where did you get that number from? When did Cruyff arrive at Barca?
Okay, fine. I meant like our entire history of Barca, and it's true. You're right to point that out. I am Cruyffista, and that obviously started one in '74 when he came as a player, and then as a coach in 88.
Something like that.
89.
And let's not forget, nearly got fired a year or two in because his team was losing. Mm-hmm. There were no results.
Mm-hmm. But look, but we've had our greatest years and achievements under that philosophy, and that's undeniable. And so that is.
But how much of that
if we stray away from that?
Like, okay, when was the last time you had that philosophy?
2015.
2015. Under Lucho? Mm-hmm. Lucho's football was way different than Pep's.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't. You made that statement several times. I keep telling you what he added. I will send you articles and you read it, and then you can disagree with what I
I'm happy
consider
to read.
football philosophers.
I'm happy to read, but I've also read an article. But I also have lived through that era. Pep played down the middle incessantly. He had Messi as a false nine.
He added verticality. And he had the MSN, which with a team like that, you have to add that verticality because the sooner you get the ball to those guys, the more magic and the more, of course.
And I've seen Lucho.
Classic.
I've seen Lucho go into defensive mode against Atletico, get pinned by the press, and rely on the counterattack on Messi, Neymar, and Suarez. I'm saying that as with praise, like that was good football. You know what I mean? But it wasn't the style. Look,
because you're talking about the defensive juggernaut that was Atletico back in those days. They were, a wall that was impermeable.
And that's what made Lucho good. He was more tactically versatile. Well, that's what I'm saying. He went game to game. He changed his tactics. Xavi doesn't do that. This is Lucho.
Well, it's still Cruyffism.
You can label anything as Cruyffism. Cruyff himself went into a Copa del Rey final against Real Madrid, played super defensive football. And won it the ugliest way possible. It's all PR, man. That's what I don't even know what that style means to you. Like, okay, like You're acting as if Barca are the only ones who play this way, and
no, I don't.
Like
City Ajax do,
no,
the Dutch
City
national
doesn't
side.
play like that.
Come on, the Dutch national side. It
Look
comes
at
from
how
Holland.
Pep squeaked by Atletico Madrid last season in the Champions League. They played so defensive against Atletico last season.
You're going to actually sit there and say that Pep is not a Cruyffista, that he is not.
No, I didn't say that. I said Pep himself has completely evolved his tactics from what it was back then. Because back then you guys had...
Sure, but the
you
root
had
of
Messi at his peak, Xavi at his peak, Iniesta at his peak, Dani Alves at his peak. That's also, you have to factor that into the analysis.
What is Cruyffism for you?
Well, it's kind of it's kind of convoluted because Cruyff himself as a coach did not play this attractive football. He had certain ideas that I think, look, let me ask you this.
That is just not true, Kiyan.
I don't know what you want me to say. I've gone back and watched Clásicos when Cruyff, because for my book, and Barcelona got dominated in those Clásicos. Real Madrid dominated possession.
Subjective.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I can. Okay. So I can, from looking at it from that perspective, he had Cruyffism. Let's say has certain ideas or principles, possession, the passing, etc., the triangle, all these things, right? The wings, using the wings. The goalkeeper is another midfielder, that sort of idea. All right. Let's just keep it very simple. That's it in a nutshell. So of course there's more football teams that play that kind of way. There was Napoli during a certain time, even from an Italian team that normally they're ultra defensive. They played an offensive style that was very recognizable to Ajax fans, and I don't limit it only to Barca. Don't do that. That's all I'll say. You know that it's Cruyffism is an idea, a brand of football that actually originated, of course, with Rinus Michels and the whole football total philosophy that Cruyff evolved and brought to Barca as a coach, and which Ajax and the Dutch football in general, you can also say.
And since then, there are many disciples of that, and it's also evolved over time. Listen, I'm telling you, like for my book, I went back and watched Clásicos when Cruyff was coaching, and Real Madrid dominated possession. They were much better. Barca played defensive football, and my point is, it's like in those successful eras as well. It wasn't just about sticking to a certain style for you guys. It was about let's do whatever works to win. And we saw this with Pep last year at the Metropolitano too. Like Atletico were all over them. They were hanging for dear life and defending in their own box. You do what works. And I just don't think Xavi can go into that mode is what I'm saying. And that's where I question him is can he do that with Barca? Because right now his high line is getting torched. It's getting torched in these big games. And okay, so here's the other point I wanted to make. Wouldn't you say the success for Barca in Europe has been way too few and far between to justify to say like our style has been the most we've been most successful when our style was a certain way. When you look at Real Madrid's Champions League titles, they've won it every way imaginable. Last year it was about grinding it out as underdogs playing defensive football on the counterattack. 2014-2015 La Decima was the year they played really counterattacking football against Pep's Bayern. 2016-2017 Zidane's team was all about possession and control and pressing. There's a tactical flexibility to the success. And that's the point I try to make, is that I think it's nonsense to be like, this is the style we want to play, and in order to succeed, we have to play this style. That's why, like, I don't think that you guys would ever hire Tuchel anyways, because he's not in the quote-unquote Barca DNA or whatever. But I would be scared of Tuchel way more than Xavi, honestly speaking.
Tuchel? You're saying Tuchel, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm not German. He's a genius. The guy, like, I would be much more scared of that. But obviously, I'm also not scared of it in a way because I know that Barca would never hire him.
Why? What makes you say that?
Well, it just doesn't really fit the style of play you guys want to put out.
I don't know. I think that He could play some interesting football with these players, but I mean that's
sure
not a conversation that's not a conversation that we need to have at all.
No.
But what I wanted to say was as a rebuttal. Okay, your Madrid are like a chameleon, right? Is what you're saying. They can adjust and basically maneuver and transform into whatever's needed to win.
Be like
that's
water,
amazing.
as Bruce Lee said.
And that's amazing. That's amazing. And that works for Real Madrid. That has worked for Real Madrid. I don't see that working for us because it never has. And the times that we tried, or that this club was kind of pulled in astray from the Cruyffist philosophy and ideas, and we tried to emulate Real Madrid and signing big stars and in all positions and just overcrowding and paying shitloads of money for these big name players without really a tactical idea, just kind of relying on the brilliance of these very talented, great football players to bring in trophies and success. And I guess some players got confused and started to actually believe in that's all that was needed, was just their name on the back of any shirt.
Like
and then
Zlatan, you're saying, or
like, I mean, I can say it like it would have been easier had it been a Friday. But no, I mean, look, in recent years, let me just say that the big name player from recent years, okay, all of those that were brought in for tons of money and joined the locker room that had come from a lot of success and basically thought, well, hey, let's just continue the party. All this to say that, I forgot my goddamn point. Esto. That, but it doesn't work. I don't believe that it work. I don't want it to work at Barca. I like, winning the trophies with this brand of football and this idea. That is close to my heart for many reasons. It's sort of like my identity, okay? I think by now, Kiyan, I have an identity crisis, or I have gone through one, and this is one of the small ones that I'm able to hold on to.
Signing stars, like...
No, stars is part of it, okay?
Yeah, but some stars, like, you just have to sign the stars that will fit into, like, Romario fit, right, in the dream team. Right? Star signing.
Absolutely.
Ronaldo Nazario.
Yeah. You
star,
have like maybe 1-2 star players. I think that one or two maximum. I think that is you have a Messi, you have a Zlatan, you have a Cristiano, you have a whatever, 1 star, Griezmann on Atletico. I don't think you can crowd your dressing room with too many stars. The Galacticos thing, well, you decide if that works for you. I don't know if you can have so many hands, because for me, then the coach becomes a secondary figure.
No, of course not. No.
You need a Valverde, and bless him, he's a kind man. But it was too much. Setien said, I should have walked out of there. I should have done what Camacho did. Camacho was like, I can't even talk to these players, let alone coach them. They're not going to buy into my philosophy and my ideas. So, and I wanted to make this point. I want to say it now, Kiyan, because then otherwise I keep forgetting. It works for Madrid. It's impressive. It's amazing. But tell me what other team has replicated that, like the Madrid style. All right. And you can, I'm not bragging here, but that Barca team, the Pep team, let's say, is talked about as the greatest team of all time for a reason, right? And that identity, that brand is very recognizable, and people, players, coaches, writers talk about it in such a prideful way for culés in this case, that it's almost like, well, we don't really want it any other way. We want to be known for that, but that's my opinion, huh? And that's my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple things, and I gotta go take my son to basketball in like 5 minutes. But the star signing thing, first of all, it's it's not that black and white. There's a lot of nuance to the discussion. Star signing, you can have a star in every position as long as there's harmony and there's a vision, a unified vision, right? Galacticos worked until 2003 when they lost their minds and signed David Beckham instead of Ronaldinho because of looks, and also sold Makelele, who was grossly underpaid. There was no sporting vision in place. It was whack. Up until 2003, it was pretty good football. It was exciting to watch. And it was efficient, and they had won a league and a Champions League in those 3 years and come to the semifinals of the Champions League a couple times. Then they lost their minds. They just had no sporting vision. So, like, if they were to build that squad a little bit better, they could have sustained winning, I think, but they just didn't. That was Florentino Perez as a rookie, made a ton of mistakes. And also the coach obviously matters, you know. The classic example is Rafa Benitez, Zidane, you know. Players have to respect you. Like Ancelotti works is a deviation from classic Italian managers in that he really, really lets the players express themselves on the field and lets Modric be Modric, lets Vinicius be Vinicius without too rigid, strict ideas in offense. He wants to let his players express themselves. And I also think your point about style and, you know, like 2009, that's the standard. That's what we want it to be as always. We would rather lose playing like that. And this is what I keep saying, like that was over 10 years ago now. Football has changed since then. And part of the reason why that formula worked so well is also because I don't like how many times do I got to say Xavi, Messi, Iniesta, Dani Alves, a lot of really great players as well that I'm not mentioning. You don't have that replicable every single generation. And also, you know, I think it's worth noting too that we talk about Spain and their success and all that stuff during that era too, 2008, 2010, 2012. Like that Del Bosque 2010 team was successful, but absolutely not the same style of football as Barca, right? It was like a double pivot, grinded out 1-0 victories. Del
Bosque used, I mean, like 90% of that squad were Barca players, and it was about keeping possession. You look at the possession stats, and it's insane. Those games were monotonous because Spain were on the ball the entire time. It's true that they lacked a star player. It was like the Barca team without Messi. That's what it was. I read that recently, that it was described like
and
that
a goalkeeper who saved Spain's ass over and over again, and a great defender, and Xabi Alonso.
Valdés was also a great goalkeeper.
And David Villa, who hadn't yet signed for Barca. And Valdés had no part in the World Cup, man. Come on.
No, David Villa had signed for Barca.
Hadn't played yet for them.
He became a Barca player, yeah.
I love how cool it is.
But that's what I'm saying.
That one in.
No, it was 90% a Barca team. Kiyan, don't always fight back.
I'm not denying that. That's a fact. But it's also it's always like a slight again, like because it could play completely different football than Barca. And
no, I disagree.
Was just as important.
I disagree. It was not.
Casillas was wildly
yes,
important.
Casillas was vital, like Valdés was for that Barca
so was
team.
Xabi
We don't
Alonso.
win. We don't beat Arsenal in the final if it wasn't for Victor Valdés. I mean, Spain and Barca had great goalkeepers. Casillas was for Real Madrid. Is that what the point you're trying to prove? That there was a clutch player of Real Madrid in that team, and that was Casillas and Ramos, of course.
Ramos and Xabi Alonso. Yeah.
Xabi Alonso.
Yeah. But anyways, that's a complete deviation. I gotta go, bro.
We have the entire World Cup to discuss this.
I don't know, man. Lately, I feel like this podcast has been too much about the same topics: style, identity, referees.
You brought it up. I didn't talk about style.
No, but come on, man. This whole thing has been about.
Because you put out an entire message. You're like, listen, culés, this is your problem. It's your style. I'm not allowed to rebuttal like in front of you.
Fine.
Suppose like this is a monologue you put out on Friday. I need to ask you about it. In fact, you brought this forward. You were like, I need to discuss this before we go. I was like, okay, go ahead.
Just feel like it would be nice to get back on track with, game to game analysis, but it is what it is. Enjoy your party against Pilsen tonight.
It's because there's been massive controversy on the Madrid side. Apparently, that's why we're still talking about this. Had nothing happened, we would be discussing Barça. We didn't even talk about Barça or Valencia Barça, and we would
Didn't I
talk
call
about
that though? Remember I called that?
Girona,
I said Valencia will lose that like with a game-winning goal from Barca in the 90th minute. Remember that? Called it. Classic Valencia versus Barca at the Mestalla. Classic.
What, late winner? I don't know if you called that. I don't remember. Well, that's a good
call
call.
it, but I also call it every Valencia Barca game at the Mestalla ends exactly like this.
I mean, normally there are more goals.
Yeah, sometimes.
But
it's
the
like
tight
3-2,
scoreline is.
Yeah. That's if Barca are going to drop points, it's going to be away from home. I don't see them dropping points from. I think the Rayo game was a bit of an anomaly, but that was the first game of the season. But that's where I think you might drop points as away from home. But even then, we'll see. It's going to be it's going to be a long season, man. It's going to lot to talk about still.
That's why we will go back to discussing more tácticas parts and less churros. Fear not, my friend. But in all, just for all clarity's sake, you were also coming on this pod with a lot to discuss due to this controversy. I've been listening a lot to your podcast, actually. It's the most I've tuned in recent times.
It's more so that I came to this podcast knowing that I have to answer questions about things I've already
I didn't ask anything. You said, I said, how do you want to go? This was all you. I was following your lead, baby.
Because I knew you were going to come in with your rebuttals on my monologue. And I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to have to address all that this podcast. Anyways, I just hope it wasn't too painful. I
enjoyed this podcast. I hope that I enjoyed it. I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it. I hope the listeners did as well.
I enjoyed it,
had a
man.
good time.
I enjoyed it. Don't worry. I enjoyed it. But I just hope our listeners aren't getting tired of the same discussion talking points. That's all. Anyways, back on track.
All right, Playboy.
Enjoy the Champions League.
We're big money, big nuts in a big fat chronic sack. You know that one?
No.
So we're back on track. We're big money, and it's rat-a-tat-tat-tat like that. No.
You got to make some beats for a podcast. Make some beats.
Yes, the intro.
Yeah.
No doubt.
All right, bro. Talk soon.
All right, my man.
Pleasure.
Yep.
Take it easy. Peace.
Like always is. Peace.